Hello and welcome. My name is Johnny. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be diving into Alex Pereira's fighting style, the pros and cons, how he uses his flaws as bait, and just overall takeaways from his fighting style. Unfortunately, we're stuck in the car today, so I'm sorry. There's a lot of construction going on at the house. So I'm forced to be in the car by myself, if you will. I went to a park, very crowded, and I couldn't find a place to do it, so we're stuck in the car. So there's that. But let's get right into it. So we'll be breaking this video into three parts. First off, his stance, his pros and cons. And third, using his cons to his advantage or using his flaws as bait. So if you were to look at his stance from the angle that you're looking at me right now, if I were to draw a line in the center of his body, his head tends to be in front of that line. So with that, he tends to have more weight on his front leg or his left leg since he's orthodox. Leaves people with that fighting style vulnerable to leg kicks generally. You tend to see a lot of Muay Thai fighters fighting with the opposite fighting style, very back leg heavy. Their front foot's kind of bouncing on the floor, like toe touching if you will. It's called the Muay Famu type style in Muay Thai. The most common person is Sanchai, or if you guys know who Lurdzilla is, the way he leans back, the way he counters is very defensive oriented. But on the other hand, Alex Pereira is the exact opposite, very lead leg heavy. With him being lead leg heavy, it leaves him vulnerable to leg kicks for the most part. He does a good job at defending them, but in general, people with that lead leg heavy style, generally people capitalize with those leg kicks from there. His stance, if you look at his shoulders as well, is very square. Most people are taught when boxing, for example, your lead shoulder points towards your opponent, that back shoulder is pinned off that back hip from there. Your body's bladed and not squared. He doesn't listen to the majority of the technical and proper ways to box or do kickboxing, but obviously it works for him, so who am I to tell him wrong? He more or less does everything on paper wrong. He's obviously a two-sport world champion in glory kickboxing and UFC. It obviously works for him. And the next thing that's a con, it could also be used as a pro, I guess you could say. And it's the fact that his style is very high risk, high reward. Depends on how you look at it. I personally view fighting on a risk-reward basis. What I mean by that is when I throw a jab, sometimes the jab could be like a hard, definitive jab. Sometimes that jab could be like a filler type jab. You jab in the gloves, you kind of jab in the air. It's a lower risk. Your reward depends. To be fair, depends on how you look at it. The reward, you're kind of figuring out your range, figuring out different looks, how they're reacting. More or less, you're building off that. That's your foundation, if you will. There's a quote I heard where your right hand will take you around the block, but your left hand will take you around the world. So that left hand, that jab really is really important, especially from a boxing aspect. If it's Muay Thai, that jab, that teep, that lead leg is a lot more useful. Obviously, you can't use your kicks in boxing, and if you do, you may or may not get disqualified. I don't know, unless there's some weird rules going on. Obviously, he's a world champion. It works for him, so who am I to tell him otherwise? Now into the pros. The most glaring pro that he has is that left hook. The reason why that left hook works so well is because if you look at his shoulders, they're squared. So inherently, when you throw a left hook, you're going to have to square your shoulders for a split second. He's already there. All he has to do is just bring his weight to his back hip, turn that shoulder, and more or less that left hook is there. Whenever I teach, I like to imagine that there's a wall right here. When people throw that left hook, you more or less use your shoulder to close that door, if you will. More or less, when you throw your left hook, your weight's going into the opposite hip. I'm not making it a big movement. If you look at how he throws his left hook, it's very little tell. He turns that shoulder, turns that hip, it's lights out. God gifted him with that left hook, and when he touches people, they crumble, and it's a thing of beauty, if I'm being honest with you. The second pro is his back foot. If you ever look at his back foot, it's on his toes. He's springy. He's ready to go. If you look at any fighting style that requires like pull, counter type stuff, you look at Mayweather, Nicolini Loche, one of the greatest defensive boxers of all time. If you think Mayweather's the GOAT, look him up. Look at his back foot. It's very springy. He's on his toes. The reason why that's so important is because it allows him to pull his head, pull his entire body. I like to think of that back foot as like the motor of the boat. My body's the boat. My back foot's that motor. Sometimes that back foot could pull. Sometimes that back foot is able to push. Whatever it may be, he uses that back foot as a spring. And also he gives his opponent a false sense of range. So for example, if I'm in my fighting stance right now, this is my center right here. The more I lean forward, the more I give the illusion that I'm this close to them, when I'm in reality, if I shift my stance to my back hip, I'm really this far away. So it's a false sense of range. If you've ever seen the movie Karate Kid with Jaden Smith, when they walk up those stairs, he sees that guy with his hand charming the snake, and wherever the guy's hand went, the snake's head followed. Same idea goes for his fighting style, or any fighting style in general. His hands are kind of low, his shoulders are kind of square. He has like a peekaboo type style where his hands are very right there, giving the illusion that his face is nice and wide open, and that lead hand is constantly grabbing the wrist, constantly touching. The more his opponent would be preoccupied with that lead hand, which allows him to kind of set other things up as well. Also, going back into the back leg being propped up, ready to go as like a springy back leg. Defensively, it allows him to pull, allows him to shift his weight back and forth with different stances. With that back leg, giving him different stance options. He could be front leg heavy, he could pull with that back leg. With his calf kicks as well, the reason why there's no toe in his calf kicks is his leg is already loaded, ready to go for the kick. All he has to do is just boom, snap his foot. He's obviously 185 pounds, 205 pounds when he fought Yuri. So the fact that he has all that 200 plus pounds of weight, snapping that little calf kick from there goes a long way. Plus, he's obviously a world class kickboxer, so he knows how to generate power with a very minimal tell and very minimal movement. If you look at most like boxers, for example, watch them hit the bag. You never ever see a professional boxer pivoting their foot and doing the proper technique on every single punch. Look at their weight transfer. Look how they sit into the hip. Look at when they throw their cross, how the weight goes into their hip, as opposed to them focusing on that back foot, pivoting and squishing the bug. Or when they throw that left hook, people teach, oh, make sure to turn your knee inwards, X, Y, and Z for that left hook. Look at any professional boxer hit the bag, especially when they throw a left hook, especially a left hook. Their weight just sits back to their back hip. They're able to generate that much power off very minimal movement because of all the repetitions they've done. So when people say when they're throwing a left hook, pivot that foot, it's more like a tell. It's more to allow your body to fully rotate those hips. It's not the all-in be-all. Alex Pereira is a good example of that. When he throws his left hook, it's not a big, laborious movement where he's rotating his entire body. His right shoulder's propped forward. All he does is boom, drops his weight backwards. Very minimal movement, very minimal tell. Same concept with his leg kick or the calf kick. He's propped forward on that front leg, ready to go. He just snaps that foot, he whips it, he's ready to go from there. And the last pro, in my opinion, which is also a con, is the fact that his hands are low. It gives a false sense of confidence with his opponents. If you're ever sparring or fighting somebody and their hands are down, everybody, it's universal that like you kind of lick your lips. You're like, oh yeah, I'm about to light this guy up because their hands are down. But he uses that to his advantage, which brings me into our last point, is using our flaws as bait. So Alex Pereira knows that his hands are low. He knows that his right shoulder's forward. He knows that his body is square. So he knows that his opponents are going to want to headhunt him because his hands are low, his shoulders are square. He's leaning forward. He gives this false sense of range. Knowing that, it makes his left hook even more deadly. The reason why his left hook works so well is because, like I said, from a forward perspective, a traditional boxing stance, this hands in my face, you can barely see my face. With his fighting stance, he's very square, face is wide open, gives the illusion like, hit me in the face. So when people overextend with that right hand, or if they're southpaw, they throw that left hand. Jamal Hill threw that left hand with no movement whatsoever. He just waited for any sort of movement from his opponent and then boom, dropped the left hook in, drops Jamal Hill, drops everybody he fights, essentially. I think he had one flying knee knockout, but other than that one flying knee knockout, all of his knockouts more or less have been through that left hook. His shoulders, he's already loaded, ready to go for that shoulder. All he needs to do is boom, transfer his weight back just a tiny bit, especially with the 4-ounce gloves. It's lights out for 99% of people, plus the amount of power he has in that hand. It's God. I'm telling you, God has really blessed that left hand of his, and it's a thing of beauty. So I guess the biggest takeaway that anybody could take from this is no matter what your fighting style is, whether you're front foot heavy like him, whether you're on your back foot, whether you fight like Dominic Cruz, very sporadic, being aware of your pros and cons and using your flaws as bait. What I mean by that is if I feel comfortable fighting with my hands down, I don't personally. I know that my opponent will be headhunting the entire time, knowing they were going to want to hit my face because my hands are down. Knowing that, I know they're probably going to be punch heavy, which most people in America especially are. It depends on your sport. I'm going to use Muay Thai, for example, because I'm a Muay Thai fighter. Muay Thai, most countries, they're very kick heavy. America is very punch heavy, or that Muay Mat type style, if you will. Most other countries in Muay Thai, they're more kick heavy as opposed to the American style is a lot more going forward pressure, hand heavy stuff. The reason why I think that is because culturally in America, like football, for example, when we watch football, we look forward to people getting trucked, people getting laid out, people getting just knocked out cold. We really don't value, in my opinion, we don't value the pretty and the art of certain sports. We just see it as like a brutal event happening where people are trying to knock each other out, when in reality, there's so much poetry and art and movements and fighting styles and Pereira's fighting style as opposed to Adesanya's style, as opposed to Ilia Toporia's style. Ilia's a good example as well. He's very lead leg heavy as well, but he's very hand oriented. He throws punches and bunches. When he knocked off Volkanovski, he missed like 2 or 3, posted on the shoulder, took a little step to the right, and bink, that right hand put his lights out. My personal favorite fighter right now, if I'm being honest with you, him or Adesanya. That's my fighting style in general. I'm nowhere near where they are, not even close, and I'm well aware of that. They would light me up very badly. However, my fighting style tends to lean towards their style, and they influence the way I move when it comes to my training. That's all I got for today's video. I hope you enjoy. If you do enjoy, please give me a follow if that's the case. I do want to start posting more videos like this. I do feel it very important talking to this mic, so I'm going to keep this mic for like a while. Hopefully, I could do this in my house when construction's done. Feel free to hit up my Instagram at Johnny2Nice. And if you have any questions, comments or concerns or things to add on, let me know so we can have a discussion. I'm more than willing to hear what you guys have to say as well. Just please let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video.